Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. I hope everyone's doing good. It is a pretty dark and stormy day here in Midcoast, Maine. I guess we do need some rain. It's been super dry. We started off this whole season, spring into the early summer, with rain almost every week, and it's been months without rain. And we definitely need some rain. So it's pretty dark and stormy. I just uploaded a video about my view on some of the recent, I think, kind of outlandish comments that Ridley Scott made in regards to Hollywood films and things like that. So check that out. I've kind of lost respect for him quite a bit. But that being said, as far as movies that are coming out, um, I don't know. Like, I really want to see. There's three movies coming out that big big budget Hollywood films that I want to see, but then at the same time I'm kind of like I have some reservations about them. I've heard they're you know I've seen some things about them, and I'm a little bit on the fence, but I do want to see them. I do want to see the new um, film by the starring The Rock, Smashing Machine. That movie looks pretty good. I'm a big fan of mixed martial arts and martial arts, itself, and it's a biopic about Mark Kerr, who was one of the first like superstars or rock stars in the world of mixed martial arts. And I saw a thing that movie totally bombed. I guess in the box office, it's an A24 film, but I don't know. I do kind of want to see it. I've heard some mixed things about it, but I do want to see it. I thought the trailer looked really good. I've been a fan of Mark Kerr for a long time. I've been aware of who he is in the world of martial arts and mixed martial arts for a very long time. Pretty wild story. And then I do really want to see the new Del Toro Frankenstein film that's coming out in a couple weeks. I've heard again some mixed things about that movie, but and I do love some of his films, and then some of his films I don't think are very good, and sometimes I think Guillermo del Toro is maybe a little bit overrated. He's not very consistent sometimes, but I do really want to see Frankenstein. It does look really good. And then the new Tron movie, Ares, which is coming out, I think this weekend. I've heard very, very mixed things about that. That visually it's stunning. It's kind of got this whole amusement park ride kind of vibe, but other than that, it's pretty bad. But I don't know if I'm going to see that in a theater. We'll see though. I do want to desperately get the soundtrack for it. It is a soundtrack that was all composed by Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails, which I heard is really, really awesome. And I've heard one or two tracks from it, and it's just killer. So I might get that today. I have to go up to Bangor to get my teeth butchered, and so I might do that afterwards. But anyway, I want to talk about this movie and actually this collection of these different versions of a film I have covered, but I haven't really taken a deep dive in this whole package, and I started watching some of the alternate versions of this film, and I love this movie to death. It's one of my favorite movies that I bought fairly recently. It's got to be one of the most like kind of riveting, surrealistic, trashy exploitation movies I've ever seen. And I watched one of the versions of this film, and I did a show on it a while ago, and it's the export cut. And the movie is the Demoniacs from 1974. What a what a killer movie, and what a beautiful box set. So I wanted to do a show where I'm going to talk about kind of the alternate versions of this film, because there's like three versions of this movie on this in this collection. And I started watching the second one. The other version that's on here, kind of not really interested in watching it, just because it's apparently a an American cut of this film. Um, This is a French film, and it was directed by Jean Rollin, and it came out in 1974. And again, this was put out by a label I had never heard of before, Indicator. And I've seen this movie in the shops for a while actually. But again, I never seen this movie, and then it was a pretty good price. It was like $20, and the packaging is just incredible. It looked super trashy. It's kind of a psychosexual movie. There's this movie is very graphic. Not for the faint of heart. It does have well a lot of like rape scenes in this movie, and it's very like psychosexual. But it's also a film that is very surrealistic. And I don't know, this movie might not be for everyone as far as the content, but again, that's one thing I've come across a lot with a lot of these like low down and dirty exploitation movies is this is one of those movies I think is something that could be kind of considered an art house film. This could, be a film that appeals to people who are more into films that have like a European flair, or like, directors like if you're into films like, by incredible directors like Louis Buñuel, the surrealistic French director, or if you're into Ingmar Bergman, would be another great kind of comparison. Fellini, directors kind of that caliber that have this really unique vision, and they essentially make art house films, but they're just amazing films. I think this movie could appeal to that audience, and it could be for like people who are not necessarily fans of low down and dirty exploitation movies, because I think this movie has, well, I guess you could say, the best of both worlds. It's incredibly graphic. It's kind of a deranged film. It definitely very psychosexual, but it has this very surrealistic quality, and the cinematography for this movie is just absolutely spectacular. And again, there's like multiple versions of this film, so I wanted to talk about. I started watching this other cut of the film. There's a version on here that I'm not really well. It's I guess it's good to have to just be as a collector. But I think one of the things that is kind of cool is it does have three different versions of the movie on here, and it's good to just have from a I guess an historical perspective. And if you're just a big fan of this movie, and I'm a huge fan of this movie, um, there's a there's an export cut which I did do a show on a while ago, which is basically the film in its entirety. It's uncut, and all of the graphic scenes were left in the movie. They're not cut out. And there is an American version on here that I guess, which is the third one. I started watching the second cut, which isn't really different. It's basically the same movie, but it's got a really cool little introduction by Jean Rollin, and that's I guess really the only difference. But there's a an American cut on here that where that version was heavily edited, and a lot of the graphic kind of nature of the film was kind of gutted. And so I'm not really interested in watching that. But I did watch when I first sat down and watched this movie. I watched the European cut, which I did a show on. But there's so much stuff on here, and I thought it was really interesting that there's so many versions of this movie that I want to do a second show or a follow up video, because this movie is just it's kind of a masterpiece. It's kind of a sleazy masterpiece is the only way I can think of it. But the American cut, I'm not really interested in watching it just because that's a problem that happened to a ton of exploitation movies. Especially going back to the time of movies that came under the scrutiny of being labeled, or back to the video nasties list of movies that were really really graphic in nature, but then they were essentially banned. in England, and and then they were almost impossible to get, and then there were bootleg copies of these movies that were, for the most part, illegally obtained, and then they were duplicated and put on VHS. And so for many years, maybe even a decade or decades, there were so many versions of these, quote unquote video nasty movies, or movies that were, you know, uh, deemed objectionable by the powers that be, especially in England. A lot of these movies were cut. A lot of the gore scenes, a lot of the sex scenes, a lot of these things were cut and essentially banned. And a lot of these movies were put on VHS. And then a lot of these movies, because they were banned, which is the nature of things when things are banned, they became cult sensations. And then now, fast forward to 2025, which is, if you're a collector of this filth, it is the best time to be alive, because now we can see all of these glorious trashy movies in their true, in their true light, and their true representation, uncensored. And then they come with all kinds of great special features. And then again, this is a primetime example. This is one of the most beautiful packages. It's got this beautiful slipcover, and again, I've talked about this, but just incredible. It's got this whole thing on the back, and it's got this incredible booklet. This is the actual Blu-ray that's in here. Really beautiful, beautiful packaging. And then it's got this beautiful booklet about this film and also Jean Rollins' career. Just incredible. And so I wanted to do a show where I talked about the special features and then mainly these other cuts. And I started watching this other cut, which is the second cut that's on here. That is essentially the same movie, but it is different because it does have an introduction to by Jean Rollin. That is pretty cool and pretty informative. And again, I'm probably not going to watch the American version just because I don't really want to see a censored version of this film. I mean, what's kind of the point of that? But other than that, there's a really, really good documentary about this movie. By Stephen Thrower, who is a really I don't know, key figure in the world of exploitation. He's written a whole bunch of books on all kinds of great directors and films in the world of exploitation. He's a British writer. He was also a musician. I'm gonna probably do a show on him because he's a really interesting character. But he's got all kinds of books. His background was in music, and then he also has a ton of books out all about, you know, all kinds of great directors in the world of exploitation. I think he even has like a couple like autobiography books about Lucio Fulci and Jess Franco, who are two of my favorite directors. Lucio Fulci is my favorite Italian director and my favorite exploitation director. And he is on a lot of these discs that I have, a lot of these movies that I own. He's all over them. I mean, he's an expert in when it comes to the world of all things exploitation. You know, whether you want to tackle the subject of non-exploitation or crime exploitation movies or slasher movies or folkloric horror exploitation movies. I mean, you name it. This guy is so incredible and so knowledgeable. And I've seen him, he's on a lot of the movies that I own as far as when it comes to the special features. So I really learned a lot about Jean Rollin, who I did not know anything about. I also discovered a lot, or that's how essentially how I learned anything about Jess Franco was an interview with Stephen Thrower. So just tremendous. And so I think I'm going to do a show where I'm going to just talk about him. I kind of want to. I would love to reach out to him and maybe do an interview with him, but we'll see. That might be a tough thing. But really, an amazing, beautiful collection, and I love the second version of this film only because it does have a pretty cool little introduction by Jean Rollin. Other than that, it's the same cut. It's essentially the same exact movie as the I believe the export cut, which is the original French version. Nothing is cut out as far as I can tell, but still, again, it's my second time watching this movie, and I wanted to do a show on that version or on this version, but then just talk about go a little bit further into the special features on this beautiful set, beautiful collection. So, and again, I think from just being a collector, it's good to have all of these versions of the film of this great film. Um, and again, I'm blown away that this came out in 1974 originally, which is just wild when you think about it. I think this is one of those movies that probably couldn't be made today. There's we do have films that come out that truly do push the envelope. I think you have well, directors like Lars von Trier, the German director, who's made some pretty provocative movies, and then you have a film like The Substance with Demi Moore, where they go to places that you kind of can't believe, and you're kind of shocked. But I don't know. I think this movie would be the Demoniacs would be a tough sell today, but incredible film. And I do think it's one of those movies that you could it could bridge that gap, between for people who are not into sleazy exploitation movies. I think this movie has a very much a art house quality. It's beautifully shot. It's very surrealistic, beautifully shot. Great music. The cast is wonderful. It's a really high level, if you will, exploitation movie. 74, my favorite. Coming right out of my favorite decade. So yeah, just a brilliant cut and just a brilliant collection of versions of this classic movie. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.